Great. Nice. All right. My name is Shannon Miller. I am a licensed professional clinical counselor, and I work as a school-based clinician in Delaware City Schools at Hayes High School. And this is Hannah Weber, a licensed social worker. She also works up in Delaware County with me at the WILL program, which is for high schoolers who have trouble in kind of a standard educational setting, and then also a couple of our elementary schools. So we eat, sleep, and breathe children and adolescents Monday through Friday, all day long. This is kind of our bread and butter, so to speak. And so we're excited to just share some basic mental health information with you guys tonight in hopes that it'll help you in better understanding your children and kind of why they do what they do, and why are they being so angry and for over the top reasons, and yes, it is more than just hormones and being in high school sometimes. So hopefully we can help guide you through this. As Hannah said, we are recording it, and the recording will be accessible through Syntero's YouTube channel. So you can always go back and watch it again for reference or share it with friends or family. As well, if you would like a copy of the slide presentation that we're using, at the end of the presentation, if you put your email address in the chat box, we can email that to you later after the, probably in a day or two. So that's an option as well, just so you have some resources. And of course, if you guys are joining us, you're probably aware of Syntero's school-based services, our prevention, counseling, and treatment-based services available in the schools to your children as well. If you're not familiar with it, you can talk to your child's guidance counselor, and they can give you more information and connect you with services. But yeah, let's go ahead and jump right in here. Just as some basic housekeeping things, because of the amount of people on the program, we are asking everyone just to stay on mute, which looks like everybody is. That will help with like background noise and distractions and things. Most of you, if you did join us late, if you could put your name and your school district into the chat. We're required, most of our services are paid for by like the county mental health boards and things, and they ask for like demographics, basic demographics for our funding. And so that helps us with reporting that. Pretty much everything I just said is already on this housekeeping slide. If you have questions as we're going along, I know sometimes it's hard to remember by the end, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in. If there's a break in the conversation and there's a pause and we're not speaking, you don't have to wait to the end to ask questions. So, or you can, if you would rather wait to the end, whatever you're most comfortable with, or you can type it in the chat box, and we'll be monitoring that. And at the very end of the presentation, we will be doing a quick evaluation survey just to kind of give us feedback. What could we improve on? What did we do well? Was this helpful? Was this not helpful? So if you can take a minute, there'll be a link that you click on in the chat box. If you could take a minute to do that, we would appreciate that. All right, I think next slide, All right, so the objectives for tonight's presentation is to identify mental health disorders that are most common in school-aged youth. So by that we mean pretty much ages 5 to 18, kindergarten through 12th grade, to understand the role of brain development in mental health disorders and functioning in general, to develop a basic understanding of the stress response system, to identify common stressors that impact children and adolescents, that contribute to mental health disorders, and to develop strategies to support the success of your child and any children who experience mental health concerns. So just to kind of break it down and kind of define the term mental health disorder and what that means and what it doesn't. Mental health disorders are technically, they're brain disorders. They involve the neurology, the neurotransmitters, the neural pathways in the brain. Genetics are also heavily involved. They are common and pervasive. Your child is not alone, and neither are you as a parent in trying to help them, even though it feels like it. Symptoms are often a result of abnormal brain functioning. Things just aren't quite firing the way they're designed to fire. It's rarely caused just by stress alone. Most research shows it's a combination of genetics and environment, that there is a genetic predisposition, and then stressors and triggers in the environment can play on that predisposition and lead to mental health disorders. Mental health disorders are not the consequence of poor parenting or being a bad parent. I know a lot of parents, when kids are struggling, especially with some more serious issues, tend to do a lot of questioning of themselves and where they went wrong and was I not a good enough parent? And that's really just not at all the case. And it's not the result of personal weakness or personality flaws on the part of the child. Some statistics: 17% of children ages 6 to 17 experience a mental health disorder. 50% of all lifetime cases of mental illness begin by the age of 14. Suicide is the third leading cause of death in adolescents aged 10 to 34. That's a huge age gap. And just a few years ago, it was 12 to 25. Unfortunately, since COVID, a lot of mental health disorders have grown significantly. A statistic I saw recently was anxiety has grown 4 times in the last 2 years since COVID. Early treatment is the most effective way to help children and adolescents deal with mental health disorders. It can help them stay on track to achieving their life goals and can give them tools to manage their symptoms so that they can still live a full and happy life and not be controlled by their mental health disorders. So kind of breaking it down to the basics, we need to go back to the stress response in the system in the brain. Believe it or not, there's actually positive stress. It's called eustress is the official word for it. But kind of think like when you get, if you did theater in high school and you had the pre-performance jitters backstage, or right before a big sports game or meet, and you had that nervous anxiety. That's called eustress. It's that positive stress, that just enough firing of adrenaline that it helps you achieve your peak performance. It's normal stress and anxiety that is a short burst in intensity, but then it resolves quickly. As soon as that opening scene is over in the play, your nerves settle down and it's smooth sailing. Then we have what we call tolerable stress, which means it's longer lasting stress. This examples could be grief or a job loss, things like that. But if this child has a strong support system, healthy relationships, the effect of that stress is mitigated, even though it might last longer before the situation is resolved. Toxic stress is when stress is chronic, when it's extremely intense. We're thinking traumatic things even. It's prolonged, so it's not like it's there for a couple of minutes, a couple hours, a couple days, and then the situation is resolved and it goes away. And without good support at home, at school, it can actually lead to anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, and more significant mental illness. So how the body responds to stress. Most of us have heard of the fight, flight, freeze response. There's a part of your brain that whenever it senses that there is a threat to you, I like to tease my students, the brain can't tell if, there's a threat because you're stressed about your geometry test, or there's like, someone chasing after you trying to attack you. It just knows that you're stressed, you're anxious, you're upset. Anytime your brain senses you're in danger, it's going to trigger that fight, flight, freeze response. So what happens is it triggers adrenaline, it triggers cortisol, all these hormones into your body. All the blood rushes to your larger muscles so that you can run faster, be stronger to fight and protect yourself. And then, because of that, protects you, you can get away. And then once that reaction in the moment is completed, the danger is dealt with, the body relaxes again. However, with chronic anxiety, chronic stress, even just constant panicky thoughts, that adrenaline, that cortisol is constantly getting fired and never really shuts off. And over time, this results in the buildup of those stress hormones, which can actually result in physical symptoms in the body that can even mimic medical symptoms, medical problems. Go ahead, Hannah. So some examples of some of those symptoms. And a lot of parents, it can be hard because they mimic symptoms of actual illness or actual medical problems. And so it's easy to, assume they're faking it or assume they're not really sick. And in actuality, they really aren't sick physically. But their anxiety, their mental health is so powerful, it's actually causing physical body reactions. Some of those can include fatigue, headaches, stomach aches. They may actually throw up, tight muscles, skin irritations, frequent infections or illness, difficulty breathing, chest pain, constipation, diarrhea. I have a student I'm working with at Hayes that actually has psychosomatic seizures. It's not a medical seizure coming from the brain, it's a stress-induced seizure. Some of the things that happen with their thoughts, a lot of excessive worrying, a lot of indecision, negativity, kind of foggy thinking, difficulty concentrating, difficulty problem solving, paying attention, kind of hasty impulsive decisions, impaired judgment, behavior that you might see on the outside could lead to substance abuse, loss of appetite, restlessness, jumpy, jittery, loneliness, trouble sleeping, and some emotions you might see, just real over-the-top reactions to like really little things that shouldn't have such a big reaction. A loss of confidence. They might seem indifferent or apathetic. They might seem depressed or really irritable or cranky, overly tired all the time. Go ahead, Hannah. So some common triggers of those kind of stress responses, and there's some that overlap the different age groups and some that are specific to the younger kiddos versus your teens. Younger kids, you're going to see a lot of maybe a little more aggressive behavior sometimes, acting out in class, conflict with their peers, that will increase bullying. I know has been a big issue, and that will definitely lead to increased stress. Significant changes in routine. So that could mean just a move from one house to another. Things like divorce and going back and forth between houses, a death in the family, academic expectations, stress from schoolwork, and just that pressure to do well, and just in general negative thinking. For your teens, puberty is going to play a significant part. There is a lot of hormones that are happening, but there's also just a lot of life change happening. Identity formation, peer pressure, having to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, where you want to go to college. There's all the physical body changes happening. Let's not forget social media, adult expectations. Sometimes 15, 16-year-olds are inadvertently expected to act more mature than what their developmental age is. And they're expected to be making these mature decisions that their brain has just not developed enough to be able to do. And just that difficulty being able to unplug. Some kind of common overlap. School is a big stressor, whether it's academics, peer relationships, bullying, fitting in, that fear of rejection, overscheduling. I can't tell you how many times I have my straight A high academic kids that you would think, on paper look like they have it all together, are in my office just stressed and in tears because maybe there's a lot of expectations or a lot of demand put on them, maybe a little too much, or they're kind of perfectionists. Big life changes, as I mentioned, family changes, and just general community stressors. These things can all play a role in just things that trigger stress and anxiety for kids. Some warning signs to be looking out for. If you notice changes in their sleeping or eating habits, whether that's sleeping a lot more or significantly less, or just real restless sleep, eating a lot less or a lot more, losing weight. Another warning sign is just withdrawal. And that can be hard to tell with teenagers because there is a certain amount of withdrawal that's normal at that age. Where they want to kind of hide out in their room a little bit and listen to their music and talk to their friends. But just be paying attention to how often, how much time. Do they talk to anybody in the family ever? Do they, are they willing to join you for activities here and there? Or is it just this constant door closed in your face? And it can be hard to tell. And that's why it's important to kind of take all of these kind of symptoms and warning signs in together. Increased irritability or moodiness, difficulty concentrating, somatic complaints, which just means physical, like headaches, stomach aches, nausea, things like that. Just a general loss of interest in pretty much everything is a classic sign of depression, but in particular, things that they used to actually really enjoy doing, they don't even want to do that anymore. That's kind of a big red flag. Not tolerating praise or rewards, especially in teenagers, although it's younger and younger, unfortunately, for substance use. I will tell you with my high schoolers, when they struggle with stress and anxiety, their number one coping mechanism is pot. Just the reality is it makes them feel calmer. It makes them feel better. And And when I talk to them, I definitely stress, okay, let's look at the pros and cons here. Yes, it does make you feel relaxed, but look at all these other things that aren't good about it. And, really trying to help them weigh the wisdom of their decisions. And then self-harm behaviors, and particularly for teenagers, that could include cutting, which typically is on the arms, but I've also seen on the abdomen, on the upper thighs, typically anywhere they can cover it up so it's not seen. And I think it's a really important to distinguish with self-harm behaviors, such as cutting, that usually that is not a suicide attempt. Cutting and self-harm is more about satisfying like an urge for like one of multiple things. Either, they're so depressed and numb feeling that they just want to feel something, even if it's pain. Or maybe they just have this anger and kind of this self-loathing that they want to get out on themselves. It's typically not an actual suicide attempt. So that's important to know, because I know that can be scary for parents when they start seeing little cuts on the arms.
And I'll add to this slide as well. The self-harm behavior is not checked on the children's box, but we are seeing this type of behavior younger and younger in our elementary students. So they are not immune to it. It's definitely not as prevalent, but it is still happening. And so just to be aware that if you do have younger children, this is definitely something to be aware of if you're also noticing some of these other warning signs.
Thanks, Hannah. Okay, next slide. I know this is a lot of information, so if we're going too fast, let me know, but I also want to make sure we get it all in our short hour together. We do want to take some time to address social media because it is a huge concern with mental health. And I know parents are really concerned about social media, as they should be. Go ahead, Hannah. There are positive benefits to social media, and social media itself is not inherently good or bad. It's how it's used by the individual person. I myself have benefited from, Facebook and catching up with old high school friends. And I used it as kind of a means of helping when I grieved my grandmother. And I would leave little comments on her old Facebook page, when I was really missing her. And, there's different positive things, obviously it connects people, and connectedness and relationships are important support systems for everybody. However, research shows a strong correlation between heavy social media use and increased risk for depression, anxiety, loneliness, and self-harm. Social media can promote negative experiences such as inadequacy about life and appearance. I've had a lot of my high schoolers say that they would do like Instagram fasts because they found themselves constantly comparing themselves to like the Instagram models, and seeing people's pictures and feeling like, oh, their life is so much better and my life sucks compared to theirs. And so it really kind of affected their self-esteem, and kind of the FOMO, the fear of missing out. There is such a thing as social media addiction. The neurological processes of addiction that involve substances or gambling, or anything else that you can become addicted to, you can become addicted to social media just like you can become addicted to drugs. It's giving you that dopamine fix, that rush, and you keep needing more of it to feel as satisfied. So that can be an issue. It can also lead to isolation, cyberbullying. I've seen that as a big issue because the anonymity gives a lot of kids more courage maybe than they would in person. They think they can't get caught, saying and doing stupid things. So those are all some potential issues. Go ahead, Hannah. It's definitely recommended to monitor and limit your child's social media use. If they're on it 24/7, that's, common sense. That's not healthy. I know that there are like Verizon and Apple phones, and there's a lot of technology now, a lot of apps that enable parents to limit the apps that they're allowed to add. Like, they can't add things to their phone unless the parent approves. I know a lot of parents will, every once in a while, hey, can I check your phone? I have students that, tell me that, oh yeah, my dad checks my phone, or my mom checks my phone, or it's okay to do that. And I know some high schoolers really balk at that. It's an invasion of my privacy. I think there's ways to do that without creating an enemy in that way. And I would say be upfront about it. If they're getting their phone for the first time, set the boundaries and the standards right off the bat. If they've already had their phone for a while and you're just now, kind of trying to dig into all this, it's going to be an adjustment period, and they're going to push back at it. Expect that. But I would, if you could give, instead of, maybe going into their room when they're not in there and getting on their phone, be upfront about it and just say, hey, can I check your phone right now? Like, as a parent, you don't, shouldn't have to, quote unquote, ask for permission. But you would be surprised what a long way those simple words can go with your teenagers, and making them feel like they're respected, or they have a choice, or their wishes are respected, or they're not being looked down on. And that will make them feel more comfortable being more open with you. Even just that simple ask, even though it's really not an ask, like, you both know you're going to be looking at the phone, even if they say no. But it's kind of just the way it's presented and set up can kind of ease that. And just letting them know, hey, periodically, I'm going to be asking to see your phone. I just want to keep you safe. There's a lot of crap out there. Don't get me started on the TikTok challenges. It might be healthy to enforce social media breaks. Like I said, I've had some students that self-imposed Instagram breaks, where for 30 days they didn't use it, or for a week they didn't use it. Sometimes that's necessary and needed if you feel like your child is on there 24/7. And especially with teenagers who are old enough to kind of understand what's going on. I have found that teenagers respond a lot better when you talk to them as if they're an adult, even though they're not. That makes them feel respected, and it makes them feel like what they have to say or what they think is important to you. And so, just using those little tricks to be like, okay, listen, like here's the deal, like, be real, be age appropriate, honest, right? And share with them why you're concerned about that particular app, why you're concerned about some of the stories that you've heard, whether it's from in the news or in the media, or from other parents, and just say, I just really want to make sure that you're safe. And then, of course, encouraging as much physical activity and offline interests. You want it to be balanced, so if their social media use is as much or less than physical activity, like sports or clubs, or actually hanging out with friends in person, I call that a win. Go ahead, Hannah. And knowledge is half the battle. Just take the time to educate yourself on what's going on in social media, and it's pretty easy to find on the news. But I know there's a lot of I think it's for us in Delaware, there's like Delaware Moms and Moms in the Know. Parents kind of share stuff on there, make sure you're up on what the latest TikTok challenge is. Some of them are horrific. Know what's going on out there, so that you can have an honest conversation with your kids about it. Go ahead, Hannah. So kind of switching gears a little bit, want to talk about some specific mental health disorders that are really common in kids and adolescents. And the first one, I think the biggest one, is anxiety. I know that I'm seeing more social anxiety in particular this school year than any other year in my high schoolers. I'm sure that's partly related to COVID. Anxiety is, there's, just normal general worry. And then there's anxiety. There's similarities, but there's also some differences. With just general worry, it typically resides just in the mind, right? What if this happens? What if this happens? Oh my gosh, tomorrow, I've got this test, I've got this big job interview for work. It's kind of all in our thoughts. It's usually very specific, distinct, and concrete. I'm worried about my geometry test. I'm worried about this job interview. I'm worried about if we're going to have enough money for all of our expenses at the end of the month. It's usually grounded in reality. It's a realistic worry. But it's not so much that it actually impairs your functioning. It's not affecting your sleep. It's not keeping you from getting your job done during the day. It's not affecting how you interact with your kids or your spouse, but it's there in the back of your mind. Comparing that to anxiety. Anxiety is not only experienced in the mind, it's also experienced in the body. We mentioned all those physical symptoms earlier. And that's because of that fight, flight, freeze, and the adrenaline and the cortisol. Anxiety, the worrisome thoughts tend to be a lot more general and vague. Just general worries about the future and what if this happens and what if that happens. It's not necessarily concrete or specific, and it's not necessarily grounded in reality. I know a lot of parents get really frustrated when their kids express anxiety about things that are like, why the heck are they worried about that? It's not even logical. That's exactly what anxiety is. It's illogical, intrusive thoughts, illogical worries. And it's usually marked by catastrophic thinking. Everything is worst case scenario. Oh my gosh, the whole world's going to come to an end, if I don't get that part in the play, or, that kind of stuff. And it usually does impair functioning. It's affecting sleep. It's affecting appetite. It's affecting their ability to concentrate in class, that kind of a thing. Go ahead, Hannah. Some of the warning signs of anxiety, very similar to warning signs for stress. I like to think of it as a continuum where stress is on the low end and full-blown anxiety is on the opposite end. So there's a lot of similarities. Some warning signs are if they're visibly anxious, their facial expression, their body language, and there doesn't seem to be a real identifiable trigger, not like a specific concrete event that would warrant being that anxious. You might notice that it seems like they're having trouble breathing or breathing really fast, like rapid, shallow breaths. They might be shaky. They might even be sweating, usually irritable, kind of cranky, kind of snappish. Difficulty concentrating and sitting still, kind of jittery, kind of restless, kind of jumpy, might startle easily, tend to withdraw, very tired, extra fatigued, might sleep more than usual. The physical symptoms, like we mentioned, and then a sudden decline in schoolwork is also a warning sign. So what are some things you can do to help? If you notice those warning signs, don't be afraid to talk to your child about it. Ask them, hey, I noticed blank about you today. What's going on? How can I help? You don't have to wait until they come to you. Express what you're concerned about. share your observations. Hey, I noticed you seem like, you're not eating much lately. Is everything okay? Don't be afraid to ask questions. A couple things, some things that we teach our students at school, some different coping strategies that you can help them with are what we call some grounding exercises. And some of these things sound super simple, but they really actually do work. A favorite with my teenagers is the 5 senses technique. So I'll ask them to look around the room they're in when they're feeling really anxious, and just in their head, name off 5 different things they can see, maybe of the same color, like blue or brown. And then listen, this says here, but it's usually easier to touch rather than hear 4 different things in a room. So I'll ask them to touch 4 different things of different textures, and then notice like 3 different sounds, 2 different smells, and then 1 thing they could taste. So it just engages all 5 of their senses to give input to the brain, to tell them they're safe, and to shut off that fight, flight, freeze response and help the body calm down. Or something like think of their favorite color. How many things in the room can they find in 1 minute that are that color? That's another grounding activity. Something that just grounds them to the moment. Deep breathing is really helpful with anxiety. I teach like 4x4 breathing. So a slow breath in for a 4 count and a slow breath out for a 4 count. Using supportive statements like, you know what, we'll figure this out together. You're safe. I'm with you. It's going to be okay. And then if you need to, encourage a short break to re-regulate themselves. So I have some students, all they need is just a quick walk, and it will help them regulate their anxiety. Just taking a walk down the hallway, or a walk from the classroom to the bathroom and back. A walk outside in the neighborhood could do the same thing. Or maybe it's just noisy and loud and they just need to retreat to their bedroom for a little bit for some quiet space, especially if they have a lot of younger siblings. Coloring, reading, doing a puzzle, listening to music is a big popular one. Playing video games, believe it or not, can actually help distract them and regulate them in small quantities. Go ahead, Hannah. All right. So me and Hannah are going to kind of switch off here. So this might be a good natural break. Are there any questions so far before we keep going? We're kind of halfway through. Awesome.
That's good. All right. So switching gears, talking about anxiety, moving on to depression. Let's see if okay. So some warning signs that we might notice if your child or somebody around you may be exhibiting depression would be a sustained depressed mood. That would be obvious, right? So they're feeling sad and they might stay sad for a prolonged period of time, or just down and withdrawn. They might experience a lack of interest or pleasure in most activities. Shannon touched on this a little bit earlier, and this would be a loss of interest or pleasure in activities that they may have enjoyed before. So maybe they loved soccer and all of a sudden soccer practice is hard. They don't want to go. They're not motivated. They don't want to try out for the team, something like that. And this would be a little bit more than just like they're not into it anymore. There's typically, when this compounds with a lot of other factors, that's when it's a little bit concerning. A sense of worthlessness or guilt. So if you see them oftentimes blaming themselves for a lot of things, saying things like, I'm dumb, I'm worthless, any of those negative self-talk sentences. They might experience a difficulty in concentrating, thinking, and making decisions. They may come across as more irritable or angry. Obviously, they may be expressing some thoughts of death or suicide. They may be more tired. You might see that they're coming home and they're sleeping a lot more. This is not to be necessarily concerning if they're taking all honors classes, lots of AP, right? So there might be some other things that are making them tired. But again, this is one that if you see these other symptoms as well, it might be concerning. Changing in their sleeping pattern. This could be that they're sleeping too much. This could also be that they're not sleeping enough. If they have constant thoughts running through their head that are keeping them up at night, constantly having some intrusive thoughts, something like that could cause them to stay up and struggle to sleep. They may experience a change in appetite. Again, might be eating too much, might be eating too little. And they might also complain about some physical symptoms such as headaches, stomach aches, and chest pains. Again, these symptoms are very real to them. And while it might not necessarily mean they are experiencing any physical illness, there is something going on in their brain that's causing their body to experience these very physical symptoms. So if you start to notice signs of depression or anxiety in your child, it's really important that you share those observations. There might be a very natural reason as to why they're sleeping more, why they're not interested in something, why they're eating less, something like that. But you don't know that until you talk to them about it. So don't be afraid to talk to them about it. Feel free to have multiple conversations about it. Your child might not necessarily be upfront from the beginning. They might also tell you everything that's going on, but the earlier you catch it and the earlier you're willing to talk about it with them, the quicker that you can get them any services or supports that they might need to help. Which leads me into number 2, which is getting them linked with a mental health professional who can provide a further evaluation. Somebody like Shannon or I, who is licensed, who can complete an assessment to make sure that that is really what's going on. It can also help rule out some other things that might be going on, might not be going on, but also just to help you get a baseline and a framework of how do we help our child from this position. It's also important to follow safety-related recommendations. So if you've ever had a child in Syntero services or really any behavioral health services, and they've sent home a safety plan with you, it's important to follow that closely and to be in contact with the provider who created that. So if anything changes on that, we can be making those necessary adjustments in order to keep your child safe. Another mental illness that we see a lot right now is attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder. This is ADHD. This is also ADD. They have combined them into 2, and there's the attention deficit side, there's the hyperactivity side, and then there's the combined type in which your child would be experiencing both. So some signs and symptoms. Again, we have inattentive and then hyperactive. If your child is exhibiting inattentive symptoms, they might have or lack the interest or lack attention to detail. So they're not paying attention to the little things. They might make careless mistakes or take unnecessary risks. They might have a difficulty sustaining their attention. So maybe they can pay attention for 5 minutes, but anything after 15, 20 minutes, they start to daydream or start to drift. They might be easily distracted. They might experience a lack of follow through. So you have a conversation with them about doing the dishes while they're on their phone. And then the next thing you know, it's been an hour, they still haven't gotten up and do the dishes. So sometimes they just struggle with being able to put what they've been asked to do actually to action. They might struggle to not look like they're listening when they're directly spoken to, almost like their brain's just kind of somewhere else, because it probably could be. They lose items frequently. We always laughed that my brother has ADHD and he would lose items all the time. His room was a mess, but he always knew where things were if they were in his room, but anywhere else, they were totally lost. And they might dislike sustained mental effort. So this would be something like a math test that requires them to think for a long period of time, reading for a long period of time, because their brain struggles to be able to focus for that prolonged period of time. If they're experiencing hyperactive symptoms, they might fidget, tap, or squirm. They might leave their seat when they're expected to remain sitting, or kind of move around in their seat a lot, getting up on their legs, getting down on their legs, that kind of thing. They might run, jump, or climb when the situation is inappropriate. So maybe you're walking through like the halls of the school and they're bouncing off and like hitting all the lockers and stuff like that. They might be unable to play or enjoy leisure activities quietly. So if they're younger and they're engaging in some imaginative play, they might struggle with like, hey, can you quiet down? They might struggle to be able to sit quietly in a meeting situation, or maybe they're disruptive at church, someplace where it's typical for them to sit and listen and be quiet, that might be extremely difficult for them. They might seem like they're always on the go or driven by a motor, like you can't calm them down, you can't settle them down, just super always ready to go, always ready for the next thing. They might talk excessively or blurt out answers before the question is completed, and that's just due to their brain not being able to control their impulse to share what's going on. And they might also just have trouble waiting. And again, sometimes, especially with young children, we're talking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Some of this is pretty typical. Just their brain is not fully developed and they don't have those impulse control skills that you gain as you get older. So sometimes these little things can be okay and children can grow out of them. Sometimes they don't. And that's more so when it becomes problematic, and intervention is very beneficial. So what can you do if you start to see that your child is exhibiting symptoms of ADHD? To the extent possible, keep activities engaging and interactive. So this might mean a little bit more on your part of, let's go to the park and run around for an hour. Let's go to the trampoline park. Let's, like play video games together. Something that they can do that causes them to burn some energy and causes them to use their brain in a more tactile way. Providing age-appropriate fidgets or other sensory toys are great. I know that Shannon and I both have an office full of these toys because it's really hard, even for adults sometimes, to come in and sit and have an engaging 30 to 45-minute conversation with someone without feeling like they have to do something with their hands. There are tons of fidgets on the marketplace. I'm sure that I don't even need to stress this because I'm sure you're all aware of it already, but those are great. And they do have them for infants as well. I mean, they run the gamut when it comes to what's age appropriate. Incorporating regular regulation breaks into your daily routine. So schools are pretty good about these days. I've noticed with a lot of my elementary school students that they have more breaks put into their day. Certain students who might be on an IEP or a 504, something like that, may have an opportunity to go for a walk around the building or something that can help them with that pent-up energy that they may have and help them with their attention. If it's a weekend and you have tons of different errands to run, something like going for a walk for a little bit in between, maybe it's getting lunch together, something that you can do to help their brain settle down so they don't feel like they're constantly on the go or not being stimulated enough. And it's also important to work with your school counselor, your school staff, anybody else who would be able to provide support for your student in creating a plan. Again, that might look like a 504 or an IEP, or just anything that teacher can do to help support your student. That's what we're there for. That's what the teachers are there for. I feel like I can speak for them. We want school to be engaging for your student. We want to set your child up for success. And sometimes that just requires a little bit of advocacy on the parents' part to make sure that they're getting what they need in that setting. Another thing that we see a lot of, like Shannon mentioned, is substance use disorders. We do typically see these with a lot of our teens. I can definitely echo Shannon in saying that a lot of the teenagers that I work with, that is their coping skill. We say, that's great, let's come up with a couple more, some backups, because obviously we don't want that to become something that is so addictive that that's the only thing that they use as an adult as well. So substance use disorders are the absence of positive coping strategies, and these can lead to unhealthy behaviors such as substance abuse and full-blown addiction. So if they are smoking weed a lot, that means that they're not using some of those other coping strategies that might be a little bit more natural, like listening to music, going for a walk, spending time with friends, petting your pet, something like that. During adolescence, the brain is still partially or particularly susceptible to a lifetime addiction because it's still developing. We say oftentimes that brains are really not fully developed until about 25 or 30. So when our students are engaging in these behaviors young, we're already breeding that this is what the brain needs to survive. So it's going to become more addictive to them, especially as they age. The prefrontal cortex, which handles our reasoning and decision-making, it grows a lot during those preteen years, but it's pruned back a little bit during adolescence. So this is why we oftentimes see impulse control or like not impulse control, risk-taking behaviors, and that increases susceptibility to addiction. Addictive substances that affect the brain are more dramatically natural rewards. So like foods and social interactions and stuff like that, oftentimes those rewards aren't as natural. Over time, the brain regions responsible for judgment, decision-making, learning, memory, all of that begins to change and certain behaviors become hardwired. So what the goal is here is that substance use disorders are not becoming hardwired as they're aging, but that we're replacing that coping strategy with something like social interactions or like going for a walk, something that is healthy for them in their development and as they age. Things that you can do if you start to recognize that your student or your child might be struggling with substance use disorders. Again, recognizing the warning signs. I'll stress with every single one of the mental illnesses that we're talking about, the quicker you pick up on it, the easier it is to help get the support that they need and help unwire what is being wired, because you're just giving them the skills that they need, that even as adults, sometimes I need somebody else to look at me and tell me, this is a healthy way to do this, or this is a coping skill. And sometimes just hearing it from someone else, especially I hear it all the time from kids. Like if I just didn't hear this from my parent and I heard it from somebody else, maybe like it would make me think differently. That's never to downplay your role as a parent, but sometimes kids just need to hear it from somebody else. So recognizing those warning signs, again, losing interest in previously enjoyable activities, suddenly dropping a solid group of friends for a new group. That is a huge one. If you start to see that their friends are shifting and you don't necessarily get the best feeling about these friends, that's a large warning sign that they could be engaged in some substance use. If they're experiencing hopelessness, aggression, or anger, they might be sleeping more than usual. Again, especially with something like marijuana, that is going to delay a lot of their responses. And so it's going to make them more tired. It's going to suppress a lot of that. You might see an increase in rule breaking or risk taking. So this could be driving the car past curfew or just staying out in general past curfew, or engaging in some riskier behaviors. And also a lot of physical changes, some weight loss, frequent nosebleeds, eyes that look bloodshot or watery, shaking and tremoring. Those can all be symptoms of substance use, and also some withdrawal. It's important to connect with a professional for help. There are tons and tons of people who study substance use very, very in depth. It is not my area of expertise, so it would be definitely something I would want to refer to somebody else for, because this is a very specific niche field, and the professionals who've been trained for this know exactly how to offer the support that your child might need. Setting clear boundaries around access to substances and specific consequences for use. So if you have a medicine cabinet, locking that medicine cabinet, decreasing the number of times that they're around friends who that they can get that resource from, stuff like that. And also being open about risk factors. If you know that substance use runs in your family, it's important that if you feel comfortable to share that with your child, because it's important for them to know that, number one, sometimes this stuff is really unavoidable, especially if they get into it young and it's something that they have seen family members use, or they know that they have a genetic predisposition for. Number two, I have a lot of kids that I meet with who will not touch drugs or alcohol because they know it is a genetic predisposition, and it actually deters them from wanting to engage in that behavior because they don't want the consequences that they have seen family members go through. So a quick who's who in treatment. This is, it all sounds the same when you're looking. It's very easy to just assume that everybody does the same thing, but there are some differences. A psychiatrist is an MD, so they are a medical doctor, and those are the people who can prescribe medication. A lot of times your student and your child might meet with a counselor or a social worker or a psychologist who can say, medication might be a good idea, let me refer you to a psychiatrist. They're the only ones who are going to be able to prescribe that medication. A lot of times your child's pediatrician is able to prescribe certain medications, but we would definitely recommend seeing a psychiatrist, as they're specially trained in these medicines, versus a pediatrician who has a general understanding of some of them.
I would definitely like to second that with Hannah. I'm seeing a lot of that in the high school, that family doctors are diagnosing mental health disorders as well as prescribing medications that aren't always appropriate. And so I want to encourage parents to be cautious, because family doctors are not trained in mental health. A psychiatrist did a residency in mental health. That's why they're a psychiatrist. And so they just don't have the training. And sometimes the diagnosis isn't correct. They're saying they have something and it's really not the right thing. And then they're prescribing inappropriate medication. And I've been running into that a lot recently, and it's a little worrisome. And so I just want to urge caution in that regard.
It's a great place to start if you are thinking things. But I think we'd both recommend that you ask your family doctor for a referral to a psychiatrist, as they are going to give you the best diagnosis for what's going on. It's kind of similar to like us. You could come to us and we could probably tell you have a cold or a flu, but I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to officially describe that based on just what I've seen in my practice. So definitely look into a psychiatrist if you're looking for any mental health medication. A psychologist, they have a doctorate degree, so they can do psychological testing. They will be the ones who will test for things like dyslexia. They can test for autism. They can test for some of those learning disabilities. And they also diagnose and treat mental health disorder through counseling as well. Clinical counselors and licensed social workers work very closely together. I am a licensed social worker. Shannon is a licensed clinical counselor. Both of them require master's degrees. There are some social workers who just operate on a bachelor's degree, but they typically will not be doing any diagnostic situations. They'll be doing more providing just support for the family and case management roles. Clinical counselors diagnose and treat mental health disorders through counseling, as well as social workers. Social workers can also help individuals with family problems, including mental health matters. And the master's level, again, can diagnose and treat. Clinical counselors and licensed social workers and psychologists, they can work individually. They can work with the family. They can work with couples. They can work with really anything that's going on. So if you are ever interested in seeking out any services for your child, these are the four main people who we would recommend that you start with. So creating supportive environments. How do we do this at home? Strategies for the home include being able to talk and willing to listen. A lot of times it's very easy to listen to what your child is saying and immediately want to respond with ways to solve the problem. Sometimes kids just want a space to vent, and it's okay if you don't have all the answers. They aren't always coming to you for answers. Sometimes they're just coming to you because life is hard, and being a teenager, being a child is hard. So don't feel like you always have to have the answers. Don't feel like you have to be working really quickly in your brain to come up with a way to solve their problems. Sometimes they just want someone to listen. Practicing relaxation techniques, especially before the situations that may feel daunting. So something like deep breathing before going to see the dentist, or spending 5 minutes in meditation before going to school, something that helps relax them ahead of time. It's also really important. The more that your child sees you practicing these skills, the more that they're going to model those skills. Our kids are watching us. They see everything. And so if they're watching you practice healthy strategies and healthy ways to cope with mental illness, with stress, with just the things that life throws at you, they're going to be more likely to be able to do that as well. Creating and maintaining a healthy sleep schedule and monitoring screen time is huge. Spending time engaging with the outdoors. I know we're in Ohio. I know it's cold. I know it's gray. It's a bummer, but it feels really good when you get to go outside and walk in the neighborhood or go for a walk. There's like 12.5 metro parks. That's probably like not even close. There's tons of metro parks around here that are really easy to get to. They're always free. And they offer a variety of activities. Listening to music while getting ready in the morning, preparing for bed, brushing your teeth, something like that can help calm the brain. And encouraging breaks and spending time online is also great. That kind of goes with the monitoring screen time of 15 minutes on your phone, and then we're going to all sit together and eat dinner, and then we're going to go for a walk, and then you can get back on your phone before bed, something like that to help break it up. Establishing clear structure is also a great way to help decrease stress and improve your child's overall well-being. Children and adolescents, adults too, we all thrive when we have structure, when we thrive when we have a routine. Sometimes that routine feels mundane when we've been going at it for so long, but it is really healthy because then your child is always going to expect what's happening next, and that's going to decrease their stress and decrease their anxiety and worry. So establishing that clear routine, especially over holiday breaks, spring break, summer break, can help them set up for success. I noticed that the day after holiday break, a significant amount of the students I meet with were not at school. And when I asked them the next day, hey, where were you? Oh, I just slept in. It was just too hard to get ready. So prepping them for those changes is really helpful in just being able to slide them back into that structure. And then having those regular routines can be so fun and easy to create. YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram, the internet, anywhere has so many different fun like printouts that you can do to make the routine fun. You can make it a game. You can add a reward system into it. Whatever works for your child, whatever helps them, sounds great. So after school, this is an example. After school, Sam gets a snack. He sits down and works on his homework for 30 minutes, and then they're given a break. So they eat the snack, they start the homework, and then they go outside. So he can either return to TV or play outside for 30 minutes after the homework is finished. And then at the very end, they start getting ready for bed around 9. So Sam comes home from school every day, and they know that this is their schedule. They know that this is the structure. Maybe that 30 minutes is playing with a neighbor, anything like that, whatever you can plug in that works for you and your family. Ways to avoid unnecessary stress and anxiety. It's setting a realistic expectation. If your child is 5, they're not going to be mowing the lawn. They're probably not going to be unloading the dishwasher because they probably can't reach half the cabinets. But your 12-year-old might be. Your 5-year-old might be able to make up their bed in the morning. They might be able to pick up their toys after they play with them. So giving them chores, giving them jobs that they can achieve, that they're excited to do, and ones that aren't going to cause them unnecessary stress because they might not do it right or they can't exactly pull it off. Encouraging the use of self-regulation strategies. So again, that's the deep breathing, that's the grounding, that's any type of coping skill that we briefly discussed. Maintaining those routines. And again, rewarding healthy behavior. My dog's in training right now. When she does good things, I give her a treat. It's similar with kids. When they do good things, they get rewards because rewards breed happy and good behaviors. That's not to say that they need to be rewarded for the rest of their life, but until it becomes routine for them, it's important that they constantly are being rewarded, even if that's just verbally, like, hey, thanks for taking out the trash. That's going to encourage them to want to do it more. Creating and maintaining healthy boundaries. This can be with people, this can be with electronics, this can be with games, whatever it looks like for you and your family, that your child is receiving things that they enjoy, they're doing things that they like, but also that they're having boundaries, that we're not playing video games from sun up to sundown. You know, there's something in between that helps them in the everyday. And then discouraging procrastination. We've all done it. We all will do it. Our children are going to continue to do it, but trying to discourage that is going to significantly decrease their stress, because if the project was done 3 days in advance versus the night before, they're just going to feel better about it. I won't go over all these, but this is 38 ways to relieve stress in less than 10 minutes. A lot of the students that I work with, when I talk to them about coping skills, I'll say, you know, what do you like to do for fun? They'll name like 8 things. And I'm like, great, those are all coping skills. And it shocks them that they're already doing it, because sometimes we just do these things like reading a quote or spending time with our pet, and we don't realize that that's actually helping us relieve stress. So some other things might be squeezing a stress ball, reading for pleasure. That's not a book that your child was assigned. That's something for fun. Doodling, drawing, chewing a piece of gum or eating a mint, taking a shower, kicking a soccer ball, tending to a garden. All of these things are great. And again, as you're doing these behaviors, your children are going to model these behaviors. This is one of my favorite graphics. I use this with a ton of the kids that I work with, because again, it just shows like that some of the stuff that we do subconsciously is considered a coping skill. And so when you go into it with the right mind, if I'm going to go for a walk today because it's going to help clear my mind, it can significantly increase your ability to decrease stress and reduce anxiety, depression, anything else. All right, so we have come to the end of our presentation. I am going to stop the recording now so that we can do questions or comments and you guys feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm also going to put the link for the evaluation in the chat. We would appreciate if you could fill that out for us. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask them or put them in the chat, whatever you're most comfortable with. But we appreciate you being here today.